Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Do ordinary words have the power to chart the course of our lives? Do they have paranormal power? What is multidimensional rebirthing?
Rebirthing. Hey there, and welcome to the 139th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and the opening words came from the co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad.
Sorry about the typo.
Yeah, it's all good. But before we introduce our guest, let's do our weekly paranormal contest. Carrie Feldman from Chicago got last week's question right. In what town in Illinois was a monster of this description seen by many people in the 1970s, 3 legs, 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights, and short arms on a 4.5-foot tall and grayish body? And the town was Enfield, Illinois.
I can make a comment about certain relatives, but I won't. This week's question is easy. In what state is the so-called Haunted Canyon located?
Call us locally at 401-766-1240 or nationally at 800-449-1240. Or email us at eno@onworldwide.com. If nobody gets it right before the end of the show, drop a line to me at bennett@behindtheparanormal.com.
And the winner gets a copy of the book, The Language Codes, by today's guest. And that guest is R. Neville Johnston, author of The Language Codes, Hidden Language Codes, and 11 Self-Improvement Protocols. He has been a light worker since he was shot to death in a mugging in 1977. Like so many who have had what is called the near-death experience, Neville returned to life with new ideas and new abilities. Co-host of the popular live metaphysical television show Telepathic TV, which airs in the Washington, D.C. area and on the Internet, Neville does past life work, multidimensional rebirthing. I want to find out what that is. The opening of the third eye ceremony, entity detachment, that we know about, DNA upgrades.
DNA
I could use
upgrades.
A few, yeah. Seichim attunements, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Palm reading, face reading, and Mayan astrology. He also creates the Copper Hathor waveform generator devices seen in his books. That sounds pretty interesting. And Neville's website is www.telepathictv, that's one word, telepathictv.com.
R. Neville Johnston, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Well, hi. Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Ben's going to start us off.
All right. What is a light worker? Like no heavy lifting or something like that?
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
Yeah.
We, the human race, and human has become kind of an old term. It would be you person, I would say. There's so many teachings involved in this. The work that I'm doing, especially through the books, is the idea that everybody has access to a much higher consciousness. What's keeping that from being very common is the words that we speak and think in. A word is a program, just like in a computer. You have a word in your head, and you have a program running. And we don't even know that. And in our human computer, there's no such thing as a delete key. You get a thought in your head, and it just repeats itself till it shreds. So the books are designed to give us authority, even sovereignty in our thought process. For example, the word, a very common word that's used, and it's less common, and I'm very happy about that, is the word should. Now, the word should is a guilt manipulation. This is nothing personal, but you should know that.
Yeah.
See how that made you wrong and was humiliating? If you use the word should, what should I do? You are asking another person to take emotional responsibility for your life. You told me that I should do that. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay.
So there's so many words, and we have no idea that they set off programs that result in reality for us.
Wow. Hey, Ben's got another question here.
Right. So tell us about hidden language codes and where they fit into your work.
Well, the hidden language codes are the looking at what the word does in reality. Once we get to the point that we recognize ourselves as sovereign over creating our own reality, the day comes that you recognize that everything that happened in your life was actually your idea. There's no such, then you are responsible for yourself, and then you are an adult. That was my idea. Well, you could have used the word accident to describe that. No, it was my idea. I created that. I explain in the books I was shot to death, and that I never, ever forgave the man that shot me to death because there was no reason to forgive him, because he was doing exactly what I wanted him to do. I, in fact, love him for having shot me to death because I got to live an exceptional life as a direct result of the death experience. When I was on the other side, I saw the moment where that soul and I signed the contract to create the event of my being shot to death. And he said, "Kids, you know, when you're 27 years old, I'm going to blow your head off." And I go, "Yeah." And then we laughed and laughed and laughed. So I never forgave him. There was nothing to forgive. Everything that happens is our idea, and our language stands in the way of that, stands in the way of that revelation.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get back to those subjects in a second, but I wanted to just remind everybody that our call-in numbers today, 401-766-1240 locally, and nationally, 800-449-1240, anywhere in the U.S., and the email is eno@onworldwide.com. Now, Neville, the power of words is something we today seem to have lost sight of completely. I mean, we throw words around as if they don't mean anything, and I'm a big advocate of recognizing the power of words. I think they carry incredible power, race memory, ability to heal or harm. They can convey love or hate as if they, even if they don't mean anything, ancient cultures, and I'm sure you know this, of course, forbade the use of certain words except at special times. They recognized the power of names. In some cultures, you had one name for everyday use and another that was semi-secret. And today, even the best brought-up kids, you'll hear the F-bomb now and then, which is probably one of the most powerful, hateful words of the language. And I'm sure you sound like you would kind of agree with those ideas about the power of words, and maybe you could tell us a little more.
Well, there is incredible. Let me just put it this way, and I believe everyone can understand this. A word is a decision made. If you say or even think the word, you've made a decision about reality. You have told reality what to do by thinking or speaking certain words. We all know the expression of a week from hell. We know that expression.
Yeah, I just had one.
Yeah. Okay. Supposing I said to you, all right, call that week very stimulating. Okay, now that completely changes the reality of that week. You see what I mean?
I hear you, yeah.
Yeah. Now, it's true that the reason it seems so hellish was that you were constantly battling against something. Okay, and so that was a bunch of decisions made. And those decisions did not have to be made. We could say, all right, well, that happened. I'm going with the flow. I'm going to allow this. Now, once you allow it, you stop using your free will to resist it. The word victim is, to my mind, far more severe a word than the F-bomb. Far. Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, there's no such thing as a victim because everybody chooses everything that happens. Katrina had people that participated. People participated by leaving town. People participated by saying, look at all that water. And people participated by using Katrina to call their gate into their next incarnation. But there were no victims.
Interesting.
Yeah, now the word victim implies powerless, and there is no point anywhere that a human being is powerless. Now, our language, I had no choice. Well, first of all, choice means that there is a choice. You cannot say you had no choice. You could say you made a choice you did not care to make, but you cannot say you had no choice. It's not a truth.
All right, well, I'm looking at Ben here. Are you standing in the plains of Oklahoma and there's a tornado bearing down on you? I mean, how is that your responsibility?
Okay, it is your idea because it's in your reality.
All right.
Now, have you noticed
yeah.
a tornado will destroy half a block, cross the street, destroy one house, go back across the street again, having skipped the house, and then destroy the rest of the block. Okay. Now, what went on there was somebody's auric field. That tornado went right around that guy's auric field. Because we are more powerful than, and I know people are not ready to hear this, but your auric field, we human beings are extremely powerful. Our language belies that massively. If you say to someone, we have a problem, okay, you watch that person put on a suit of armor, you watch them prepare to go to war. What they know is they're in trouble. What they know is they've been drafted, but they don't know what trouble, and they don't know what war, and all they know is they're being swept into this thing. And the book says, all right, if someone says we have a problem, substitute the word problem for the word symptom.
Symptom, yeah.
Yes, Houston, we have a symptom. We have a symptom of the government building this wonderful device, and they did not tell one of the manufacturers, any of the manufacturers, what the parts were going to be used for, because if the engineers had gotten together and said, look, we're going to strap this thing around 168 tons of exploding rocket fuel, the engineers of the company would have said, no, that's not going to work. Here, we'll show you how that's going to work. But they weren't told what it was for. So, Houston, we have a symptom of miscommunication.
All right. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. This may be a little off topic, but
no problem.
Does everybody have their own set reality? Because I've always wondered this. Because like my reality could be different from my dad's reality, your reality.
Absolutely.
So do we control everything around us, but it's just separate realities from each other? I don't know if I worded that correctly, but
each human being has their own individual universe. How do we do 7 billion people on one planet? And the answer to that is linchpin. In other words, there's a common agreement that a rock is solid. Okay, everybody believes this. Well, there's a few people who don't, but nonetheless, all of the people believe that, and therefore that is a linchpin in everybody's reality, except as in the case of the crystal skulls, and that's through the Hathor. These Hathor are beings that sing. They vibrate in a certain way, and they change reality by vibrating, and so do we. We call it our language. And now the Hathor would take a block of quartz and sing to it, and it would become the consistency of modeling clay. And then they would sing it into, the way a sculptor models, they would sing it into the crystal skull shape, and then hit a note, and it would solidify. And that's why nobody's been able to figure out how the crystal skulls came into existence.
All right.
So everybody makes their own reality through this system of vibrating, quote, reality.
Okay, I hear you. Are you done? Is that?
Yeah. I'm
okay,
good.
I just wanted to comment.
Pretty cool.
Okay, I think what you just stated, Neville, is the problem. Okay, and let me explain that. Now, in my particular philosophy, after 40 years of paranormal research, and it could be wrong. I mean, people could do things wrong for 40 years. Is that the problem is our whole Western concept of the individual, and from the Western idea that we are separate islands unto each other, for all practical purposes, comes the spiritualist ideas of the individual reality. I think the problem is that that's not necessarily untrue, but that it is a roadblock. It's why we never get anywhere, seemingly, as a society, or as a mass spiritual reality, so to speak. I think that the secret is what the non-Western mind knows, and that's that there really is no such thing as an individual, and is that we have to create together a common reality. That's my philosophy, and that, from for what it's worth. And I think the problem is that we keep focusing inward rather than outward. We keep looking at ourselves instead of forgetting ourselves and looking at each other and therefore fulfilling ourselves. I mean, it's like a harmonious circle in my opinion. So I don't know, but I seem to be a voice crying in the wilderness. Most of our guests are talking about what you're talking about.
I hear this very much, and I totally agree.
Okay.
And I want to add to it just another dimensionality.
Sure.
Now, we talk about being in the box, the thinking in the box. And not the first step out of the box is to realize that there is more than one correct answer to everything. We are stuck in the box with the idea that once we have found the answer, we then stop thinking. But that's not going to get us anywhere. That's actually the box. That there is one correct answer is a definition of the box. In other words, 2 plus 2, well, it is indeed 4, and I'm never going to argue that point. Of course it's 4.
I'll argue the point because it's not always, 2 plus 2 is not always 4.
Correct. It's not always.
In the base 2 system, 2 plus 2 equals 2.
Yes, and in just the system we're used to, 2 plus 2 is 9 minus 5. I meant to say 10 minus 6. No, I meant 11 minus 7.
Sure.
So there's an infinite number of correct answers, and until we start and train our children to search for more than one correct answer, and that it's okay with the kid that came up with the first answer, yes, that's correct, we're not arguing, and there is another correct answer. And then the question becomes, well, then I have a dozen correct answers that all work for this one thing. Now, so my mind doesn't stop. My mind doesn't shut off the way it does when there is the one correct answer. And then we can flow then. Our thinking is, we the human race think in a very, and this is actually the word, bipolar way. We seem to have one answer or the other answer. In other words, the new book, the Self-Empowerment Protocols, introduces the idea of thinking in trinities, which would be the next step up for us as a group. In other words, let me just do trinities for you very, very succinctly. Red and green, which we will say, everyone would say, oh, those are opposites. Okay, so tell me how is it that red and green are actually the same thing? The premise of trinities is that for any two opposites in your mind, there's a third point of view that allows you to recognize those opposites as the same thing. So red and green are the same thing because they're both color. Red and green are the same thing because they're both signals. Red and green are the same thing because they are Christmas. Red and green are a horrible selection of socks unless it's Christmas. And it goes on and on. Red and green are part of the EM spectrum. Red and green are perceptible through our eyes, unless you're colorblind. So once we start to shift our thinking from the polarity, this is right, that is wrong, that's very polarized.
Mm-hmm.
If you tell me a human being has got bipolar disorder, the only thing you have told me is that they take their time about shifting poles. It's Tuesday, everything's horrible. It's Wednesday, everything's great. It's Thursday, everything's horrible again. It's Friday, I'm so out of breath, I'm not going to have an opinion today. And they just flop back and forth. While a normal, whatever that word, a normal person shifts back and forth 600 times in an hour between this is good and this is, and if you want to advance Trinity thinking, how is it good and evil are the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's just get back to words. Okay. Let's just get back, because we only have an hour here, and we got a lot of complicated stuff. Let's get back to words for a second. Now, in your writings, you say that, of course, the words, as we've been talking about them, as important as they are, as programs, as you say, they sort of determine the course of our lives. They determine our reality, our own universe. What about beyond that? What about, I don't like to use the term afterlife because it implies the time exists, but in whether it be the concept of the afterlife or the concept of parallel lives that we talk about in multiverse theory, does it affect that as well? I would think that the words do that. They can affect your whole reality that echoes across the multiverse, I would think. I mean,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and so how, what steps do you take? You said thinking in trinities.
Oh, yeah,
is that the next step to take to sort of escape the cage?
Yeah, exactly.
Of the words here.
Yeah. Once you begin to think in trinities, you live in a different reality.
Huh. Okay.
You see, we, the average amongst us, we are caught in this process by which we arrive at a conclusion, the right conclusion, and then we stop the thought process when it goes in trinities. The new book is talking about trinities. I'll do the trinity of human creation for us. The trinity is everything is love. That's the first of the three. Everything is love. You take your imagination to form this love, like a sculptor forms a raw material, and then you convene it in reality. You manifest it in reality by the decision. So it's love, imagination, decision, love, imagination, decision. And that's really what's going on.
Do you...
Yeah.
When you are dealing with people on an individual basis, have you seen this work? I mean, have you taken people from the level where we begin, where we're prisoners of words or the programming and taken them to the Trinity level? And how do you do that?
Well, then, the principle, yes, I have, and it takes a while, let me tell you. And I have no particular teacher other than disembodied, other than kind of the upper end of the people that are working to bring the earth. When the first book published, I had an angel walk in the room that was enormous. I had never seen an angel anything like this. And the angel said, well, you know, I'm one of the Earth Project angels, and I'm congratulating you on the book and that this will start this process for us. We want to thank you for being here on the ground and getting this thing into reality. And so the process, now, to get a person into Trinity thinking, you more or less have to dismantle your thought process, because the thought process, as it is this is right and that's wrong. And we spend our entire lifetime painting reality with those colors. And we've used up many buckets of paint, we've used up many brains, we've used up many lifetimes with this everything's right, everything's wrong, that very stark reality. Now, when we get the person to begin to interview the idea that there's not only a third answer, but there's literally an infinite number of answers, and we step down, and we hear people attempting to step down when they say, well, allow that, just allow that to be. You can't argue with what is. Okay, and that is the correct answer, absolutely. And the fact that it is was your idea, that's another correct answer. And you can change your ideas. So the principle with trinities is that any two things that you think are opposite, there's a third point of view, a third thought that allows you to recognize them as the same thing. And then you check your trinity by seeing if it continues. In other words, another trinity representing human creation would be the inspiration, the flash, there it is, the idea. Then there's the process, and then there's boredom. Now, when a kid says, I'm bored, you know that they have had a flash, an inspiration, and they have gone through a process, and they are now done with the process. And so the word boredom means I am about to get an inspiration.
Well, that's encouraging to know.
Well, that's what boredom means.
Oh, okay. You mentioned what on this show is pretty much the S-bomb. Okay. First of all, we're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back. And I'd like to talk about the S-bomb, tell you what it is, and also talk about multidimensional rebirthing. So right back. I'm Behind the Paranormal. Stay with us.
New River Press is proud to sponsor tonight's segment of Behind the Paranormal. with Paul and Benjamin Eno. New River Press offers the best in unusual New Age books. Stand by the side of tonight's host, Paul Eno, as he battles poltergeists and helps suffering souls and families in the critically acclaimed books Faces at the Window and Footsteps in the Attic. Plunge deeper into the paranormal with Paul and learn about its influence on human history, its action in our daily lives, and its ultimate meaning for us in the best-selling Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny. Available now from New River Press, publishers of unusual books. Visit newriverpress.com, amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore. And set for release late this year in one of the most unusual books on the subject ever written, Paul gives us Dancing Past the Graveyard, What Ghosts Have to Say About God.
Okay, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. And our guest today are Neville Johnston, and we're talking about a number of interesting subjects, especially having to do with words, their power, and what they can do to make our lives for us, both here and elsewhere, or else when. Now, I was mentioning the S-bomb, and what that is, Neville, on the show is the word spirit, okay? Mm-hmm. In 40 years of paranormal research, I have come not to try, I suppose I take the point of view that every entity I run into is guilty until proven innocent. We have guests day in and day out, almost day in and day out, who have all their own spirit guides and their own philosophies, and they're all teaching different things. I suppose in a way it kind of amounts to the same thing, but we don't trust these critters. You say angels walk into the room. Well, you were there and I wasn't, and it's perfectly possible that an angel walked into the room. There are angels. There are lots of good, we have a lot of helpers out there, but we have a lot of enemies too who are very, very good at Halloween, pretending to be something that's good, and people will fall for it every time because, boy, hey, this, and this may be wrong in life, but I got this cosmic entity from who knows what planet paying attention to me, and that's cool. So, I mean, obviously you're a man of experience. You're a man of intelligence and clear thought. Mm-hmm. Why did you believe that this was really an angel?
Oh, I believed my own eyes.
Well, that's not always a good idea.
Well, there's a whole philosophy that's come about that's finally beginning to spread. And you know how everybody will say, well, everything's good, and they've just been totally trashed.
Everything's warm and fuzzy, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's just change that ever so slightly and say that everything is on your side. Everything is there in order to assist us to become more conscious. So just to very briefly define fear, okay, the difference between fear and information is the level of consciousness that the person is perceiving from. In other words, okay, I'm in a car and the car is headed for a brick wall and I happen to know I can step on the brakes. So then that brick wall and being in the car is merely information. If I don't know that I can steer out of the way or step on the brakes, then it's this overwhelming, adrenaline-filling, gut-wrenching fear where I am looking at my imminent death. So the difference between fear and information is the level of consciousness that we're at. Now, once you hit a certain echelon up there, no matter what it is, it's going to turn out to be on your side. Now, the amount of time that it takes us to recognize the distance between the event and the response, in other words, the event, and when we recognize that event as having been on our side, is delayed greatly by our language. For example, we have the word accident. Okay. Now, let's say that a human being was in an accident and they totaled their car. A few years later, they go, oh my God, I got a new car out of that. I got met a whole new bunch of people that changed my life entirely. And before the accident, I was thinking, I got to get a new car. I want to get a new life. I want to get all this stuff. And so the word accident kept the person from fessing up to the idea that was their creation. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
However, there's another word in the language, and it's called caution, and another term in the language called common sense.
Correct.
So I always stress to people, you've got to. if somebody walks into the room, claims to be a spirit, and as I often say, I don't believe half the people I meet on the street. I'm not going to trust some critter, especially with my experience with these critters, and I assure you, there is danger. There is plenty to be afraid of, and there, I just, I see what you're saying, but I don't know if I quite am there yet. Maybe it's my problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me before we get into the multidimensional rebirthing, a fascinating term. I wanted to ask you about your near-death experience. Obviously, it changed your life. Did you have any of these experiences, or were you interested in the word issue before you had the NDE, or was it after?
No, that definitely came after. Prior, my grandmother taught me to read palms when I was 6 years old. And a 6-year-old isn't going to catch on to that, let me tell you. So magically when I was 18, I was shot when I was 27. Magically when I was 18, I was in college and I began to read books on the subject of palmistry. And so that had opened up those particular doors, and then face reading was right behind that. So I had started and was already, teaching those subjects when I was shot to death. And when I came back from being shot to death, I could literally see people in their past lives. I had absolutely no thought, not a single thought on past lives prior to the death experience. And then I could see them everywhere all the time. And over the years, I began to see people in parallel lives. And this is what we're talking about as far as multidimensional rebirthing goes, is to rebirth us into a higher dimension by virtue of working with someone until their consciousness reaches the level, and there have been successes with this, reaches the level where they can perceive things that they are creating them.
Okay, let me stop you there and just inject a thought, and you tell me if this is where you're going. Okay, I'm following you here, okay? I'm with you. And the way we interpret the quantum physics that has to do with this multiverse thing, and there are many ways to interpret it. Many physicists don't accept it the way you and I might, but that these lives already exist, and it's just a matter of accessing them. Now, we've heard this from physicists and from shamans, and somewhat in our own experience of dealing with people who are on other sides of the membrane, so to speak. So is that the way you kind of see it, that this higher consciousness is already there in some parallel world, and we're already living it, but we just have to access it from our conscious lives here?
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it.
All right.
And another way to put it is that through the concept of soul groups, which is an older concept.
Yeah, soul groups? Okay.
Soul groups. In other words, you and your son have known each other in past lives, but let me just jump it up a slight notch. Let us say that if you go up far enough, everything is one thing.
All right.
There's no separation.
Okay.
We live way down there in the illusion of right and wrong, in the illusion of good and bad, etc., and in the illusion that we are all separate from each other. People get very caught up in, that was my idea. Okay. There are so many things we're talking about, but let me just stick to that one. Okay. Ideas go through the universe in wave form. Like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And when it hits a planet where we would call it a primitive planet, I'm talking about one particular waveform, goes through that primitive planet, and somebody on the planet figures out splints and creates fire with it. Okay. That exact same waveform hits our planet, and somebody figures out how to make a car that runs on water, because if you electrocute water, it turns into hydrogen and oxygen gas, which is highly explosive. So all you have to do is create a car that you pour gasoline in it, it electrocutes you pour water in it, it electrocutes the water, and then the engine runs off. Okay. And so then on a more advanced planet than ours, that exact same waveform results in warp drive. Now, an individual planet. Okay, so on the primitive planet with the smaller population, many people got the idea that it would be a good idea to create fire. Many people experimented And then one guy, the 100th monkey, got it. Flint, rock, fire, bang. Okay. Then he showed it to everybody else, and he would think that was his idea. He just played one role in the idea of the waveform. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think I see what you're saying. But let me go back to one thing you said that kind of bothered me a little, and that's the illusion of right and wrong.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah, could you explain a bit more? I mean, I don't think it's an illusion.
Yeah, that's part of the polarity thinking. That this is right and that's wrong is the illusion. You can get rid of the illusion by recognizing that everything is one thing, that everything... See, the Trinities lead you into the fourth dimensional thinking very easily once they are set off in you. The illusion is anything that's polarity. And the next step up would be either the Trinity or the single unit. They're kind of synonymous in a certain way. They're both ways to understand the same thing. In other words, if it's all one thing, and there really isn't good and bad, there just is. I'll do the Teflon Trinity, which is the Socratic proof. Okay. We came here to evolve. You agree? Yes or no? We came
I
here
don't
to
know.
evolve. Yeah,
well, I mean, that's up to us.
Yeah, but that's basically the job description.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I put that into a syllogism, but go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, we came here to evolve, and we evolved through the medium of having experiences.
All right.
Okay. Therefore, there is no such thing as a bad experience because it helps us evolve, and equally, therefore, there is no such thing as a good experience because it helps us evolve. Therefore, there are just experiences.
Just experience. Okay, I mean in the sense of only experiences.
Yeah, that's all that's going on here is a system of experiences.
But if it helps you evolve, as you say, wouldn't that be good? And if it doesn't help you evolve, wouldn't that be maybe not bad, but useless?
But if there were such a thing, in other words, boredom is the place at which you are waiting for the inspiration, as though there were such a thing as waiting.
All right.
Okay, in other words, lost the thread there, but it was a good one. Between good and evil. When we get to the idea that it just is, it's just an experience.
Well, let me say this. Maybe I'm looking at it from the moral point of view. If I take a sledgehammer and start breaking up the studio here, and then go hit poor Dave Richards in the head, the station owner, I mean, that's a neutral act?
From a much, much, much higher perspective, yes. Because he would have had to have agreed to have that experience, and you would have had to have agreed to have that experience. Don't forget, I'm a guy that got shot in the head, and I love the person that shot me for it because I agreed to the experience of being shot in the head, and I'm very aware of why. I came back seeing through time. I came back seeing through dimension. I came back to live a really magnificent life in which I am. There's text for you.
Okay.
One of the players that will have a hand on the lever that ratchets the human race up to a higher level of consciousness, as you are also. So this idea of everything just being an experience, then that's a very godly way to look at it, because we have these experiences in order to become more evolved. Now, I think and over the years, many people have asked me what happened to the guy that shot you. Was there a trial? Did he get it? And I say, no, I would have never fingered the guy. I would have never said he's the one that did it. I just love him. I know for a fact that the universe is self-balancing. In other words, if he continued on that path of choosing to be the person that kills, then he is also choosing that he will be killed, but that's his idea. And he would wish to retire from that life. So either he changed who he is, or he is reincarnating. Either way, it's a no-fault situation.
All right. Yeah, see, morally, I can't agree with that. But I philosophically, I have an advanced degree in philosophy. I know exactly what you're saying, and I see why you're saying it, and I see how it is. applicable within that realm. However, in the I always tell people that the thing is, I didn't only study philosophy. I worked in psychiatric hospitals.
Oh, yeah.
And, I would see what we today might call the multiverse realities in action, in what people were calling schizophrenia, and think people experiencing other worlds that there was absolutely no reason, there was every reason to believe were real, and that we were the ones who were having the illusion of not, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
And it's a matter of, we have to keep, and I'm always telling people this, we have to keep our feet on the ground. We have what we have. Our consciousness is where it is for a reason, as you might say. We're here to evolve. I might say we're here for this reason or that person or this person. But I think that moral choices have got to be primary in our lives. I mean, again, I from the point of view of practical, everyday consciousness and reality, I have a real problem with what you're saying about, these acts all being neutral. I mean, that's what Hitler thought. Stalin, who killed a lot more people than Hitler did, but won, is still nevertheless guilty of all these different things. Now, we have a question here from someone who asks, when did you decide that you were going to get shot?
Oh, long before the incarnation began.
Okay.
If I talk about the history there, this was the 50th time that other soul and I had agreed to kill each other. And I'll fess up that I started it. It was a time of famine, and this person, as a bully, took some bone I was chewing on away from me, and I killed him. Okay, and he was dead before I hit the ground. And we went back and forth. I make the joke we got married once and continued to kill each other. So in this lifetime, it was his turn to kill me. Okay.
So in a way, you're a prisoner of your so-called past lives.
No, not prisoner, evolving through. In other words, people say to me, I don't ever have to reincarnate again. And I say, well, fine. Then you're going to have to recognize absolutely everything that happens as an act of love, and you're going to have to proactively love everyone for what they do. I am writing a book now where this guy is discovering, through parallel incarnations, discovering that the word love and the word power are synonyms. In other words, if like a small child, no matter what happened to you, you responded with love, you would be the most powerful person on earth. If no matter what happened to you, you responded lovingly, you would be extremely powerful.
Yeah, I see that point of view, and I don't disagree with it either. Certainly.
Okay, but thank you for seeing it.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, it's the brightest thing in the world to see, actually, when you just open your eye. But again, there are practicalities, but we've discussed some of that. Can you just mention what is a DNA upgrade? I'm sorry, Ben was going to ask that question.
Oh, it's whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're aware of the DNA. I don't know how aware of Merkaba you are.
I beg your pardon?
Merkaba.
No, not familiar with it.
Energy form that you build around your body. Was taught by Drunvalo. A number of other people teach it. I'm teaching it myself. It's going to be part of the Galactic History class at IMU. The
International Metaphysical University, which we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah, and you build two tetrahedrons around yourself, one face up, one face down, and you then spin them, and then that opens a field around you, and with that open field you can augment the DNA and they used to talk about 12-stranded DNA, and I thought, oh yeah, that's a happy road to go down. You guys have fun on that road, up until I saw it. And the 12 strands, if you think about the tetrahedron, which is a three-sided pyramid that's three-dimensional, and that would have I'm sorry, 6. Yeah, 12. There are 12 sticks making up the two tetrahedrons, and those represent the 12 DNA. Another method of rewriting your DNA is with waveform, not the Hathor waveform.
Yeah, well, what is that about, too? The generator.
About 97, I began to dream, in other words, a thought wave was going through the universe, and I began to dream these devices. And I backed up enough to recognize that I was being played with by the Hathor. That's the, very briefly, the Egypt is a star, the ancient Egypt is a star colony in which an untold number of advanced civilizations more or less camped out on our planet for a while. One of the advanced civilizations, the Hathor, who are interdimensional, they don't have a home planet the way we think of it. They are just light beings that vibrate things. And so I began working with one of them named Zimra, who keeps showing me these designs in my sleep, and it could still happen any time, and I'll wake up with the design, and I will build that design. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. And I can buy myself more time by doing careful sketches of it, but I'm on my way to bringing that into 3D. So the waveform generators are a thought amplification device that uses crystal and copper.
That's interesting. So it simply speeds up the process that we've been discussing.
Yeah, you could certainly use it for that. I'll tell you and I have built and sold many of them over the years. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while I get an email from somebody talking about what had happened, and there have been 0 negative reports to this date.
All right. Well, there are a million more questions because I don't know anything about it. I haven't looked at it. I haven't looked at the device, but there are a lot of things on the market that people claim do things, and I have no reason to believe that yours doesn't do what it says because I don't know anything about it.
No reason to believe it does either.
Okay.
I just get to the point where I recognize what it is and how it works, and I'm not. Everything's okay. It's just whatever. I've had great success with it.
All right. Now, getting into entity detachment, I'm trying to cover one or two things at least briefly here before we have to end. Entity detachment. Now, we know what we mean by that, and we're generally involved. Ben and I are generally involved in helping people to separate themselves or to stop the influence of what we call parasites. What in folklore would be called demons or evils, whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and so how do you look at that? What do you do? What do you run into, and how do you help people overcome it?
Well, the specifics of it are that some being did not return after their death, and as you know, walks the earth looking for some human being to attach to. They will generally attach to someone who is empathetic to them in one way or another, and then they proceed to begin to take over the life of the person they attach to, creating behaviorisms in that person that were not their native behaviorisms. Okay, all of this is agreed to by everyone. The trick involved is to get the entity that is attached to agree to return to the light. They are always, and especially if they died in an explosion, they tend to be very, pardon the word, fearful of the light. So you talk to them explaining that when they go into the light, they can get their very own body, and they won't have to be in an argument with the person whose body they're attempting to occupy.
So you believe all these were human at one time?
I've seen animals, but animals don't have anything like an agenda to take over the behavior pattern. They really just want to be loved more so.
Well, so do people, I guess. But now, see, what you described is entirely different from our experience. We don't.
Oh, what do you guys do?
Well, we don't. Again, and this started day one with me, 1970, when I was 71 in my first case. It's just this. The traditional attitudes toward these things just didn't seem to. They weren't good enough for me. They just didn't seem to add up. And over the years and the decades, I sort of came to the conclusion that when you're dealing with these parasites, I see no reason why, from a logical standpoint, they shouldn't have been human. But I came to the conclusion that death is the biggest illusion of all, not even for the body.
Right.
Again, a long story. But that these things were non-human, parasitical, cosmic mosquito-type entities who seemed to have their own culture, but had never been we're living, life forms that simply are able to have access to parallel worlds more than we can. And I've seen them, we've seen them working in several at a time, almost like octopus, to reach in here wherever they can feed on someone's negative energy.
Absolutely.
And when families, and as you say, when love is lit, so to speak, especially in a family, people come together, then their power diminishes and they're even repelled. I mean, that's our experience. I don't have any experience of them having to go to any light. I mean, the light in our experience, even in photography, are the membranes between different worlds.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but I don't know. We don't experience them as ghosts at all.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's exciting all the way around.
All right. So anyway, okay. Well, tell us about your your work at the International Metaphysical University. What do you teach?
I'm going to be teaching palmistry and face reading, and working on turning those into video discs at this point to upload. It's going to be called The Language of Light when I talk about the words and the power of words, which was incidentally the original title to my book, The Language of Light.
Okay.
And I'm also going to be doing galactic history, in which I'll be taking the students and giving them inheritance from the galaxy that has been cut off from us here, part of which is the Merkaba, part of which is the DNA upgrade, and part of which is the idea that there are many, many humanoid planets not too far from here, and how we humanoids spread from the original place where humanoids evolved out of the DNA soup on a particular planet, became evolved and have since gone on. The different gene messages you might have, there's 5 separate gene messages that would still be humanoid. We're up on the second. The Aborigines are the first possible gene message. Okay,
we're going to have to cut it off, I'm afraid. But again, check our website, BehindTheParanormal.com, for the titles of Neville's books. And R. Neville Johnston, thank you. It's been a very interesting conversation.
Yes, same here, Paul.
And we'll be talking to you real soon. Good luck at International Metaphysical University, intermetu.com.
Yeah. Okay, bye, Ben. Bye, Paul. Thank you.
All right, very good. Take care then.
Okay. Yeah, it's up to you. Go
go ahead.
No. Go.
All right, okay. Well, check our website, BehindTheParanormal.com, of course, for all our schedules and interesting stuff about our guests, past and future. On our regular Sunday show tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, on CBS New Sky Radio, newskyradio.com. We'll welcome an old friend to talk about some new developments in the ever-popular realm of electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. Scientist, paranormal expert Phil Imbrogno will join us.
So check out our show website at www.behindtheparanormal.com and your local radio schedules for the cities where CBS carries our show, and the websites where you can hear us from anywhere. And remember, you can always get free podcasts of all shows along with show schedules and guest information at www.behindtheparanormal.com.
A bit of a heads up here. On this edition of the show, as of June 7th, we'll be moving from this Saturday slot to Mondays at 6 to 7 p.m. here on onworldwide.com, WON 1240. And thanks to our producer, Craig Pelletier. We'll see you next Saturday, May 29th. We'll welcome back paranormal expert and author Mary Phelan for a discussion on dreams.
All right. In the meantime, we will leave you with a quote from my dad. Explaining the paranormal is not the problem. It's handling the explanations.
See you next week.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.